Hello, hello, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotion, emotion regulation. The past few weeks, I have talked about strategic ways to manage emotions. I've talked about noticing and naming our feelings and how we interpret what's going on. Be sure to check those out if you haven't already. I am always building, especially on right now, I'm looking at how to understand emotions in a way that's going to be helpful to then know what to do. So, today I want to get a little deeper into the nuts and bolts of how the brain constructs emotions. If you want to be good at teaching emotional literacy and regulation to kids, this is really important because the way kids understand their emotions directly affects how they're going to manage them. And this is all about emotion management. Now, I already talked about how emotions are more predictions than they are reactions. They're constructed, and much of what we call emotion is our brain's best guess. It's a prediction based on all of these compressed summaries of past experiences and the body's needs in the moment. All of this is done really to construct emotion categories. Now, emotion regulation, it's not just a cognitive process, right? It's not just about willpower and thinking about what it is that we need to do. It's also a metabolic and physiological one. And we really need to make sure we're understanding that because we can understand effective misfires and, you know, context sensitive sort of application of regulation strategies. So before we teach kids to do something with the feeling, we have to make sure that they're really understanding what's happening underneath. Are they actually feeling scared or maybe they're dehydrated? We know that when we're thirsty, our body sends out more cortisol, right? So maybe they're dehydrated, maybe they're tired, maybe they're just running on these emotional fumes. And so we really need to think about that and look at the body budget as well, which I've talked also about in previous episodes. So the brain, it's constantly working. It never shuts off, right? It's trying to figure out what's going on around us and inside of us to keep us alive. Our brains haven't changed much in 200,000 years, right? It's meant to keep us alive. So all of our sensory information, all of our senses, our sight, our sound, our touch, our smell, our taste, our internal body feelings, they send a massive amount of information to the brain. It's like this really incredibly high resolution picture with millions and millions and millions of tiny little dots. There's just so many tiny details that the brain needs to process. It's high dimensional. So there's a ridiculous amount of individual pieces of data. So much so, the brain can't handle all of it. It can't handle every single tiny detail all at once, especially if we're in a dangerous situation where we need to have fast reactions. And so the brain compresses that huge amount of detail into a simpler summary. It's like taking that high resolution photo and turning it into a simple icon. When I do my in-person presentations, I'll take a high def picture and of a mountain, a beautiful landscape, and really what our brain does will put it into a simple like triangle. So that's kind of what ends up happening. Or we're taking a very detailed map and we're zooming out and zooming out and zooming out repeatedly until all we see is maybe just the main cities or provinces or states, right? So this is what's called dimensionality reduction. It's our brain creating summaries of summaries of summaries to try to help make sense of the information because it's got to react quick. And so if there's really a predator there, we're about to hit another car. I mean, we have to be able to act really quick. So those simplified, compressed summaries are really abstract, very pixelated sort of summaries because they're not about any of those tiny details anymore. They're about the broad general ideas. And so that's why it's common we might start feeling angry or annoyed or anxious without even knowing why. Sometimes, obviously, there's, obvious stimulants or triggers, but a lot of time we might not even, it's out of our awareness. Our brain is just trying to make sense of any information that's coming in. And if there's any new information or ambiguous information that doesn't have, we don't have previous experience to draw from, our brain's not going to wait around to see if it's a threat. And so the brain creates a summarized category of threat or maybe just a general feeling of bad. It's just a quick way of understanding the overall feel of a situation or a sensation. And so when we use a word like anger or fear or whatever is going on, it's not that it's this single fixed thing called anger that your brain simply labels. Anger, it's a bunch of summaries from all of that sensory input and of our past experiences that the brain has grouped together. So the way our body feels, the way we express, our facial expression or what we do when we're quote unquote angry, it can be very different depending on the situation. But our brain's constructing this broad category called anger because of maybe different experiences that we have had that are similar enough for it to make sense of them to figure out what it is we need to do next. So if our brain's predicting a situation is similar to a past angry experience, it might prepare us to respond in certain ways associated with anger. So these general categories are called low dimensional summaries because they're sort of lost in translation. There's not a lot of that original detail. And so the brain has this crude pixelated summary of information. It really has to always keep making a distinction between what is it that I need to care about? Is this a real signal to something important? Or what is something I can ignore? That's just noise, right? To be able to figure out what to do. And so when we're taking these simple compressed summaries, it's going to guess based on what the information is, and it's going to add back in specific details. So if there's big gaps in the picture that we're seeing, it's going to fill in the details. So it's kind of like when you're in the middle of the night and you're scared and you see this big dark shadow, you don't know what it is. Our brain is going to fill in the gap and assume it's something looming in the dark, right? Maybe it's a monster or someone's going to jump out at us. It's adding back in specific details at very tiny connections in the brain. It's like taking that simple icon and based on those past experiences, it's trying to draw a full detailed picture that includes what specific actions to take. So for example, if our brain is going to take that summary of anger, it's not enough to know that we're feeling angry. It's about how can we particularize that feeling into a specific action plan? Are we going to clench our fists? Are we going to yell? Or maybe we're going to sit quietly and plan our next move or run away. These are the motor plans that dictate precise movements and internal body changes, like how fast our heart starts beating or how we start breathing. So the process allows us to go from a broad feeling, like I feel bad, to a very specific response, like running away or hitting someone or thinking through the problem. The brain is constantly working to figure out, the what, the summary, as well as the how, the detailed action. But you can see it becomes a problem if it's too broad. If a kiddo just says they feel bad, well, what the heck does that mean? Right? Or if I feel scared, but they're dehydrated, we're going to respond very differently. Let's just give them some water. The brain has an infinite array of possibilities to sort through, and that can make it really tricky. I mean, the brain does so to be as efficient as possible to make an action plan, but to make an effective action plan, that's what's hard. And this is why everything that I've just said comes down to emotion granularity. That matters so much here. So if a child can only say, I feel bad, their brain has no idea what actually to do next. And so we might start jumping in and trying to fix things and giving them a candy and feeling, we're trying to make them feel better, but it's so broad, we don't know actually how to help and they don't know what it is that they actually need. And so they're probably just going to revert back to whatever they always do, like hit or cry or run away. So when we can help kids learn how to get really specific with emotions, that's very empowering because it helps them understand the emotion as well as how to react in the best possible way. We need to work on this too, right? So instead of just saying, I feel bad, and they can get really specific and say, I feel overwhelmed, or I feel uncertain, or I feel left out. Well, now their brain can build a more precise action plan. Each of those things mean very different things, and they need very different things. Precise language literally shapes the emotional experience and allows the brain to create more effective predictions with those precise categories. And the better the brain can categorize and label an emotion, the more accurate those action plans become. And it also helps with reappraising the situation and evaluating our emotions, which we know is also important for emotion regulation. We need to work on this too. There's a lot of adults out there who will just say, I'm really angry right now. I'm really frustrated. But if we can get really specific, is it I'm overwhelmed? Is it I'm stressed out because I have too much on my plate? What is it? Right? So what I want to build on is the fact that this specificity, it helps us shift the meaning and attention. And I've talked a lot about dropping into the body, labeling what the body part is that we're feeling, right? And what does it feel like? So maybe our chest feels heavy or a crushing feeling, right? We want them to become aware of what's happening in their body so that they can learn to recategorize or recontextualize their affective feelings, which can change the emotional meaning that's attributed to them. Okay, so this is a lot. So if we just think of, okay, if I have a racing heart, is that because I'm determined? Is it because I'm excited? Right? It might not just be I'm scared. It could be I'm actually excited, waiting for this roller coaster. I'm excited to go out on stage and present, or I'm determined to do a good job. I mean, it really gives us more control. It's very empowering, right? Because we have more control over that emotional construction and how to respond. So we want to make sure that kids have a lot of practice feeling these feelings and changing the experience just through this process. So we're not going to wait for big emotions to show up throughout the day regularly, every class, every hour. Let's check in. How am I feeling? What is it that I need right now? Any emotion, even neutral ones, pleasant, unpleasant, it doesn't matter. So the work for right now is to keep working on that emotional literacy, labeling those emotions. You can use emoji cards, you can use the feelings wheel, just use it regularly throughout the day so kids can really identify with as much specificity as possible how they're feeling. In the show notes, I actually have a link to an emotional literacy workbook, which will have some of these visuals that you can use to get started. That's where we need to, I've talked about this quite a bit, but now I wanted to give that understanding. And when we adults, but also kids, have a good understanding as to what's going on, then it makes sense why we really need to get specific. When we can get specific, we can make a game plan. I've gotten to the point now, I don't even necessarily need to label my feelings, but I know what the feelings are in my body. So when I have this pressing, crushing feeling on my chest, that's my overwhelm. I've got too much on my plate. I need to look at my schedule and reprioritize and replan, my coming day, my coming week. It gives me a very specific strategy to do. And that's just knowing where in my body I really need to work on. If I have not had enough sleep, I also feel it in my chest, but it's a different kind of feeling. It's not that heavy overwhelm feeling. It's almost like a breaking, almost like, my heart almost feels like it's breaking, but I know that that's my exhaustion. I've only gotten maybe 4 hours of sleep. For sure, if I get less than 5 hours of sleep, I almost always will feel that in my chest. So it gives us the more we can get into tune, it's really helpful rather than, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. It's really helpful to figure out what is actually going on. So what is it that I need? Is it that I need to go have a nap? Is it that I need to reschedule my day? And kids can get into this as well as long as you practice. So I'll leave it there for today. It's really about practicing this, right? In the coming week. Next week, I am going to move into the next step. Once we can label our feelings and maybe, do a body map and understand what those different feelings are that come up in our body so that we can make a very specific action plan. I know I keep talking about getting there, but there's so many little pieces and so much information that we need to think about. So I'll leave it there. Have a lovely day. Check out those show notes for those extra materials. Definitely pass this on to others that you think would find this valuable. If you haven't already, rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts just to help me reach more people and keep the podcast going. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next step. Take care.